Welcome back, everybody, to another thrilling episode of Thrive Your Programming with Coach 2J. This is your host, Jeremy Jones. Today we're going to talk about teaching people why rowing movements are so important for their shoulders, as well as going over some tips for the metcon. So, one of the things that we're always trying to teach people and educate them so that they can understand their bodies better and they can achieve their goals easier and faster. And one of the things that sidelines a lot of people, or that can be very frustrating for people, is when they have shoulder pain. So, in that front of the delt, or kind of the pec insertion, where you see people walking around and they're grabbing their shoulders, so you see this person standing here and they have their arm and they're always like massaging the front of their arm. This is something we see if you have a gathering of more than 10 CrossFitters, there's a good chance that one or more of them will be doing this movement. And just because we're always spending time, people are on their cell phones, all the time, and they have that that forward head posture, their back's rounded, and they're just looking at their cell phones. They're sitting like this when they're driving. They're sitting like this when they're sleeping on their sides at night. All these things cause that internal rotation of the shoulder, and it's just and you combine that with all the pressing that we do. So due to the nature of using all the free weights and the movements we do, we tend to be very frontal plane dominant. We're pressing to the front all the time, and this causes that muscular imbalance, and we start to see that hunched over posture, right? So we see people with a caved in chest, and again, the head starts to protrude forward. And what we really want to do is how we always want to be thinking about how can we counteract this, how can we balance this out. And so one of the things that we do in Thrivistry is we do a lot of these rowing movements, whether it's single arm ring rows, normal ring rows, bent over dumbbell rows, bent over barbell rows, and this is all to counteract and help strengthen and pull those scapula back and help people with their posture and help prevent shoulder pain. The other thing that we do is actually the rowing motion. When done correctly, getting on the rower is actually a horizontal pull. So this is something that is also really good for the shoulders. Any sort of, again, that horizontal pulling motion is really good for strengthening those muscles and balancing out the shoulder. The other things that we also do too is farmer carries. So farmer carries are also something, you've heard me talk about them before. Farmer carries are really good for correcting posture and stretching all the good stuff and strengthening all the right stuff. All right, so we got our dynamic warm-up here. As you can see, we've got our bent over rows. So one thing I will point out is that if you guys as coaches, or you have coaches that are changing up the dynamic warm-ups, that's totally fine. Again, it's an option. If somebody wants to be proactive and do a different warm-up or come up with their own, we just want to make sure that they are still doing some of that horizontal pulling. It can't just be, remember, this is also kind of how we sneak in some prehab. And if people are kind of changing up the warm-ups a lot and not including some of these movements like bent over rows or horizontal pulling, then people could end up with shoulder issues, right? And that's not the programming's fault. That's because the coaches may not have caught that. So just make sure that you guys are including that if you're going to change it up. So we get some hip activation, and then we're going to do some box squats, 4 sets of 6. So it's going to be pretty spicy. Just make sure that people are resting adequately between sets when they do these, and take their time on the single arm ring rows. One of the reasons why I like the single arm ring row or dumbbell row is that it takes time to do each arm, and that's going to make people slow down a little bit so that they're more rested. They can recover that ATP for the next set, right? So that's one of the reasons why I'd like to do the single arm stuff when we're doing a big lift like this, especially for a bit larger sets. And you might want to remind people too, this is week 3, I believe, of the strength focus. So you might want to remind them that we are seeing larger sets. We're doing a little bit more work toward the hypertrophy range, and so they're gonna be challenging, right? So they shouldn't be extremely challenging yet, as we're only at the beginning of the cycle. If people are struggling now to get 6 reps, they're going to really struggle on weeks 5 and 6. So just make sure they're taking that into consideration. All right, so we got Hot Gristle. We did this one back in October. It is 3 rounds. We're doing 40 seconds of work, 20 seconds of rest. We're going to go with some push presses, some bent over rows, and then some heavy Russian swings. And then there's no minute rest, so it's just 40 on, 20 off for 3 rounds, and we're just counting reps. And then there is a scale up here for people who want to do that. And again, we can see we're incorporating the row here into the metcon. Now, I don't do this too often because ring rows and bent over rows, while they're decent movements, they tend to get butchered in metcons. And again, what we really want to do is be focusing on that scapular retraction when we do these movements. So, when people start to get sloppy and they do it wrong, then it kind of negates the purpose of the movement. So that's one of the reasons why I like to incorporate them in the warm-ups and in the supersets and in the cash outs, right? So we see them showing up there because people can be more deliberate and do them correctly. And if you do have somebody who's complaining about the shoulder issues, that's something they should be adding to their warm-ups and on their own, right? So they should be doing these types of movements. Farmer carries and ring rows and horizontal pulling are really good for the shoulder. Same thing with face pulls with bands or variations on the rings. Those are also good as well. Let's jump over to the weekly overview. So you can see here it's week 3 of the Strength Focus, week 12 of the calendar year. We've got our squats on Monday. We're doing some snatching here, either power or squat snatch on Tuesday, and then our next lifting day here is on a Thursday. So a little bit different. We want to make sure everyone's getting their squats in on the Monday, but then depending on what days they come in, they may or may not see extra lifts. Then we got a really short workout here. It's only going to be about 8 to 15 minutes, so I did include a cash out here, even though that is a metcon. But this will be intense. It's squat, clean thrusters, and run for 6 rounds. It's going to be pretty spicy for folks. So just make sure that the people know that that's coming. If they feel like they need a longer metcon or whatever, this should have that feeling of like a Helen or a Fran, right? It should be pretty, if done correctly. So we don't want people going too heavy on that. Even though it's week 3, we've got pretty much kind of 4 sort of shorter workouts all in a row. By the way, St. Patty's Day, got a little Lucky Shamrock workout for the holiday. And then you'll see at the end of the week, now we've got 3 sort of longer workouts. So we got a 20-minute AMRAP, a 3 rounds for time, which is kind of in a similar time domain, but different movements. This one has work rest. This one is just continuous work. And then we got a sustained power session. So we got another long session here on Sunday. Now, again, if you guys are closed on Sundays, you might want to take this workout and you could stick it in here on Friday. Because it's a sustained power, shouldn't be too bad from a programming standpoint if you want to change that up. You can see this has overhead squats and toes to bar and double unders. This has running and wall balls and some other things. So it could probably fit in there without too much. And I try to program the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday as a little bit more flexible so that you guys can switch these out if you want to change them up a little bit. But that's it for today, guys. Thanks a lot and thrive on.